In today's lesson, what we're going to do is actually make a copy of our last one. And if you remember our last lesson, we had a image showing up in the background and then an image in the foreground, and we move the image in code. This time we're going to let the image be moved around with a touch event on our finger, since we're interested in mobile devices. So the first step we're going to do is we're just going to take our folder from last time, lesson 3, and we're going to copy it and make a copy of it. Don't forget to change the name. Notice we have our 3 files. This is the one we're focusing on right now, and we have our images directory with our 2 images. So we're just going to bring that into our development environment, drop it in. Notice not only do we have the 3 files, but an image directory with our 2 images. So here's our file from last time. Please remember to change the comment, and we're going to change what the program does. Displays an image and moves it. Use it for a person's finger. Okay, so just to recap, this line of code hides the status bar at the top of Corona simulator or the iPad. This was our global variable. Notice we have 2 images. We set the initial location of our foreground image, and we have a runtime event listener that's listening to the enter frame, which hopefully is happening about 60 times a second. And when it does, this function occurs, and we wrote that function right here. Notice it's a local function. It gets passed an event, which we're going to use eventually, but not right now. And it just takes our global variable, adds the scroll speed right there, and assigns it back to itself. So if we bring up our Corona simulator and open this up, you'll remember there's our little beetle man, and he's moving across the screen. So that's what our program was doing. What we're going to try to do is change it a little so that we can use a touch event. So first thing we need to do is just get rid of a couple things. We're not going to need this scrolling speed because it's not going to be scrolling across the screen anymore. And we're not going to need this piece here because it's not going to be moving with the screen. But we still want the status bar to be gone, and we still want the background image and our other image. First thing we're going to do is, since we have that image, we know from here what its actual size is, but it would be really nice if we could let that happen in code and we could capture that. So we need to capture the width and the height of our little character, his little image box, so that we can use that to calculate where we're going to be touching things. Actually, before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to change this event listener. So we're going to change it to not every frame, but we're going to be looking for the touch event. And we're going to rename our function touch listener. So make sure you be good lazy programmers and copy that. And we're going to change this thing that gets passed back to actually a touch event. Now when you actually have, just going to bring my iPad back here. When you actually have a touch event and you try to touch your character, there's actually 3 separate phases to the touch event. So there's the beginning when you initially touch, there's the moving around, and there's the releasing of your finger. So inside this touch listener event, we're going to have 3 if statements that check for, did I just touch my screen? Am I moving my finger around the screen? Or have I released my finger from the screen? So just to recap how an if statement works, remember you have to use the reserved word if. You normally place your Boolean expression inside brackets, just for style. And we're going to use this parameter that's being passed, its touch phase, and we're going to check if that is equal to, notice this is how you say equals, this is an assignment statement. And is that equal to begin? If it is, then you can do some code. Okay, so if you wanted to do something when you first touch the screen, you can put your code in there. Just going to copy this for our other 2 types of events. So there's the begin, there's the moved, and there's the ended. So these are the 3 phases of a touch event. So what we want to do is, if you are actually moving your finger around the screen, we want our image to actually move. So here is our image's X and Y value. What we can do is we can just take those variables. I'm going to grab those, place them here, and we're not going to assign them a hard-coded value. What we're going to do is we're going to take this parameter, touch, which is all about when we touch the screen. It gives us all kinds of information. One of them is the phase. The other one, oddly enough, is the X and the Y value of where we touched on the screen. So this event listener is going to be listening for a touch event on the screen. When we touch the screen, this function is going to happen. So we go up to this function. It's going to collect a whole bunch of information about us touching. It can tell us if we just begin. If the touch phase is I'm actually moving my finger on the screen or on the iPad, then it's going to take my current position of my finger on the screen and assign it to the position of the image. So the image should follow my finger around. So we're just going to check to see how that works. So first thing to notice, the little beetle guy is not moving around. Now in the simulator you can't use your finger, but the cursor represents your finger. So if I click and move it around, you'll notice the little beetle guy follows my cursor around. And that's exactly what we want. There's only one problem. If we put the little cursor, the beetle guy down there, and I bring my finger or cursor up here and start moving around, look what happens. Okay, he jumped over to the other side. Because I don't have any condition checking, am I actually touching within this little beetle's bounding box? All I'm doing is I'm checking if I'm touching anywhere on the screen. So it works, but not really works. So we're going to have to add another if statement, and it's going to get really long and complex. Just remember, when I code where this person's, or this little box's position is, I'm actually referring to the center. So as I mentioned earlier, we can actually in code figure out what the width and the height, the width or the height of this box is. If we know that, we can take that value and divide it in half. If we divide it in half, we take the current position that we know and subtract a half. That's this side here. If we take its current position and add half of the width, that's this side here. So we could figure out if the touch event is within these 2 bounds. And you can do the exact same thing for y. Here minus a y, half a y, you get there. Here plus half a y, you get there. So with 4 checks, we could see if I'm actually touching inside this box. if and only if I'm touching inside the box, do I move the beetle. If I'm out here, we don't move it. So this is a little long and complex, but just follow along hopefully, and it will hopefully make sense. So not only do we have to check if the phase is moving, we have to check if I am inside the beetle's bounding box. So once again, we're going to have if, then these things are going to move inside and end. So if this Boolean expression is true, then move the images. If it's not true, because I'm not touching the beetle, then don't do it. So here's the complex part. What is this thing? So just follow along, and hopefully this will make sense. So I'm going to take my image, its x value, and I'm going to have to subtract half of the width of my image. Now we currently don't know what that is, so we better go up and figure that out. So I'm going to create a local variable called my image width, and my image width is going to be from my image, and it has a property called width. You'll notice it turned blue. So the exact same thing we can do for height. So we could have used these values here, but the thing is, if I change this image later on, I have to change these values, I have to hard code these again. That's not really good, so it's better to generalize it. So that's my width. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to take half of that. So if my x position of my image, if I subtract half of its width, then I'm over at the left hand side. So if that is less than the x value of the touch, then at least I know I'm partially true. Problem is, remember, I had 4 of these things that I had to do. So I'm just going to copy this. So that has to be true, and the center of my image plus half of its width, so now I'm on the left hand side, if that value is greater than touch x. So these two together will define my x. It'll make a little box. So I'm going to do that, and now I'm going to do the exact same thing, but for y. So my image, its y value has to be less than, well, it's not going to be width this time, it's going to be height, right? So I'm going to replace height. If it is less than the touch y value, and my image y plus half of the height, if that is greater than the y, then I'm good to go. I'm just going to add a space just for convenience. So there's my long and complex thing. Basically what it does is it checks, am I inside the rectangle of the beetle? If I am, then move it. If I'm not, don't do anything. So let's save that and bring back our iPad. So if I'm touching it, it moves around. That's good. If I'm not touching it, notice nothing happens, which is exactly what we wanted. Only if I'm touching it does it work. So that was the goal for today. Just to recap, first of all, we didn't start from scratch. We copied our code from last time, so that's useful. Second thing is we used these properties of my image to get the width and the height, to shove them into variables. We have a different runtime event listener called touch, and we changed our name to touch listener. It's up there. This event has a parameter called touch, which gives you back the phase and many other things. Currently we're just looking at move. We check to see, first of all, if we're moving our finger around. If that's true, we check to see if we're actually touching the image. If we are, then we move it. If we're not, we don't do anything. And that's all we're going to do today.